Imagine a place just brimming with human history. I mean, so diverse in its genetic makeup that it holds actual keys to our origins. But for the longest time, it's been, well, surprisingly overlooked. Today, we're doing a deep dive into what scientists are now calling a genetic treasure trove. It's the incredible, still unfolding story of the Indonesian genome. So our mission today is to explore how these recent, really groundbreaking scientific discoveries in Indonesia aren't just adding chapters to human migration history, they're actively rewriting parts of it. We'll look at insights into ancient societies, connect those dots to, shaping the future of precision medicine. We've sifted through a whole stack of sources for you: scientific papers, research findings, historical analyses to pull out the most important nuggets. And hopefully this journey through Indonesia's genetics will reveal some really surprising stuff, connecting the ancient past to today's healthcare and showing why understanding this region, well, it's vital for everyone, really. Okay, let's kick off by just thinking about Indonesia's significance. I mean, it's the world's fourth largest country by population, an enormous archipelago. So the big question really is why? Why has its incredible human genetic diversity been so surprisingly underrepresented in global genomic studies for so long? It feels a bit like a historical blind spot, doesn't it? What was holding things back?
That's a really critical question. And the answer, well, it's probably a mix of things. You've got the sheer logistical nightmare of sampling across thousands of islands, right? Then there are historical funding priorities and maybe, a past bias towards focusing genetic research on European or maybe East Asian populations. So all that context makes initiatives like the Indonesian Genome Diversity Project is so incredibly important. This project was a massive effort specifically designed to fill that huge knowledge gap. In the first phases, researchers sequenced genomes from 161 people across Indonesia and Papua New Guinea. And then, even more recently, a third phase added another 254 newly sequenced genomes. These were from previously undocumented indigenous groups, mainly in Wallacea and parts of West Papua. And this new data, it isn't just about Indonesia. It's actually vital for understanding human evolution outside of Africa. It gives us these crucial missing pieces of the global puzzle.
So it's not just potentially a genetic treasure trove, like the sources say. It was genuinely hidden in plain sight, and now it's being properly explored. The potential for discovery here, I mean, for fundamentally changing how we see human history, it's actually quite thrilling. What kinds of things are jumping out from this bigger data set?
Well, one of the most immediate, really striking things is getting a much clearer picture of historical population movements. Before these projects, our understanding was pretty broad, kind of fuzzy. Now, with these detailed genomic maps, we're seeing these really specific, higher resolution snapshots of how people moved and interacted. This finer detail lets scientists trace specific migration waves and see their impact much more clearly, like going from a blurry photo to HD,
Right. Much sharper focus. And speaking of focus, let's zoom in on a region that's absolutely central here, Wallacea. For anyone listening who might not know, that's that amazing group of hundreds of islands sort of sandwiched between mainland Asia and Australia. Geographically, it's a boundary zone, but genetically, well, it's something else. A real stage for transformation.
Exactly. Wallacea is famous for the Wallace line, that sort of invisible boundary separating Asian and Australian types of animals. But for human genetics, it seems it was much more of a melting pot, or maybe a blender is a better word. Lots of studies, especially using this new genomic data, they consistently show Wallacea went through this profound genetic shift over the last 3,500 years. And we're not talking a small change. It's a really powerful example of large-scale human movement just reshaping populations. Researchers found that Papuan ancestry, that's ancestry linked to New Guinea, now makes up as much as 60% of the genetics in modern Wallaceans.
60%?
Yeah, it's huge. This happened through major migrations from New Guinea. These groups mixed extensively with the Austronesian settlers who'd arrived earlier from Asia. It completely redefined the genetic landscape of this whole vast area.
60%,
It's just
an almost complete genetic makeover. It really frames Wallacea not just as a stepping stone, but as this historical mixing pot that literally remade the identity of the region, not just culturally, but right down to the DNA. It's written there. And talking about rewriting history, let me introduce a name that sounds almost mythical. Bessay. She's described as a 7,200-year-old young woman found in a cave in Sulawesi, which is one of Wallace's big islands. The sources call her a genetic fossil. That's quite a hook.
Oh, her discovery is absolutely groundbreaking. She gives us this concrete, ancient snapshot from within that genetic crucible we were just talking about. Her DNA was the very first ancient human genome ever successfully sequenced in all of Southeast Asia, which is a massive achievement in itself, given how hard it is to get ancient DNA to survive in hot, humid climates. But what's truly astonishing is her unique genetic makeup.
She wasn't just related to indigenous Australians and New Guineans who we know have ancient roots there. She also carried a distinct, previously unknown ancient human lineage. And, adding another layer, she had about 2.2% Denisovan DNA. It just makes her profile even more fascinating. Right away, this combination of genes forced scientists to reevaluate how we thought ancient humans moved around that region. Her discovery didn't just add details, it literally rewrote parts of human migration history. It challenged old ideas about who was where and when. It painted a much more complex picture of early human movement and interaction. It showed a distinct lineage existed there, way earlier than we thought, interacting with the ancestors of later groups.
That's incredible, absolutely. But our sources also bring up an important scientific point here. While Basset is huge, critics rightly note that finding preserved DNA in the tropics is super rare, so there's this understandable caution about maybe overinterpreting data from just one person, especially if it's partial. It really highlights how science works, doesn't it? One amazing find opens doors, but also triggers careful checks and balances before we leap to big conclusions. Okay, now here's where the story in the genes takes a really interesting twist. It starts telling us about ancient social dynamics, how people might have lived. Researchers looking way back say that studies of mitochondrial DNA, that's the DNA passed down only through the mother's line, have found some fascinating patterns.
Yeah, these mitochondrial DNA studies, especially when you compare them with Y chromosome data, which traces the father's line. They suggest that women, in many ancient communities in this part of the world, seem to have traveled much more widely between communities than men did. The Y chromosome lines, from father to son, tend to be much more localized, kind of staying put geographically. This difference hints at something anthropologists call a matrilineal dispersal pattern in at least some of these ancient societies. What that might mean is men perhaps stayed in their home villages while women moved, maybe to the husband's community after marriage, or perhaps women were key in setting up new settlements. This would lead to maternal genetic lines spreading further, while paternal lines remain more clustered.
So what does that really tell us about how these ancient societies were structured? It's like finding a piece of social history right there in the genes. Amazing. Like a genetic archaeological dig, almost, giving us clues about family and community from thousands of years ago without any written records. It suggests women might have been these key connectors, linking different groups, while men maybe kept things more local. That's a profound insight. Okay, let's circle back to those mysterious Denisovans. We learned with Basset they were definitely part of the picture there, but it seems their genetic footprint in Indonesia is even stronger and more specific geographically than we first thought.
Absolutely. Genetic studies consistently show that people in eastern Indonesia carry significantly more Denisovan ancestry than people on mainland Asia do. And that difference isn't trivial, it's a really important clue. It strongly suggests that the interbreeding, the mixing between early modern humans and Denisovans, probably happened east of that Wallace line we talked about, likely somewhere in Wallacea itself, or maybe even further east towards New Guinea. This really forces us to rethink the older models of where and when these interactions took place. It pushes the timeline back and expands the map for where our ancestors met and mixed with these archaic humans. It shows a much more dynamic picture.
That is a big shift in understanding where humans met Denisovans. And just to add another layer of genetic intrigue, our sources mention something called the ASPM brain gene controversy. What's that all about? Why is it controversial?
Ah, yes. That's a really interesting area. So researchers found that indigenous Papuans have one of the highest frequencies in the world, about 59% of a specific gene variant called ASPM haplogroup D. Now, ASPM is a gene linked to brain size development. This particular variant seems to be about 6,000 years old. The controversy comes in because, while some studies suggested it might have provided a selective advantage, maybe related to brain function or development, others question that direct link. They question the strength of the evidence and also what exactly does an advantage mean in evolutionary terms. That's complex. So the scientific community is still debating it. Was its high frequency due to positive selection? Or maybe just random genetic drift? Or other factors we don't know yet. It's kind of a genetic cold case that scientists are still actively investigating, trying to figure out why it's so common in this specific population.
So we've traveled through ancient migrations, found hidden lineages, even glimpsed ancient social life. But what does all this mean for us now, today? And looking ahead, because this isn't just fascinating ancient history, right? It has real, profound modern impacts, especially for healthcare.
Absolutely. The knowledge coming from the Indonesian Genome Diversity Project is already being used in precision medicine research. For instance, scientists are now working on adjusting polygenic risk scores, PRS, for common diseases like obesity, to make them more accurate for people with Indonesian ancestry. PRS basically estimates someone's genetic risk for a disease by looking at lots of small genetic variations. A recent study used data from about 2,800 Indonesians. It showed that when they adjusted the PRS to account for Indonesian ancestry, its predictive accuracy for obesity improved by about 5% AUC. Now, AUC is area under the curve, a standard way to measure how well a model predicts things. And a 5% improvement might sound small, but clinically it can be pretty significant. It really underscores how vital it is to have population-specific genetic data for precision healthcare to actually work fairly and effectively for everyone. Without diverse data, these powerful tools just won't be accurate for many populations.
And that leads us right into this broader controversy corner you mentioned about medical equity. It's clearly not just an issue for Indonesia, it's a global problem concerning fairness in healthcare.
It's the stark reality, yeah. And it raises urgent ethical questions. The statistic is pretty shocking. Something like 91% of global genome-wide association studies, GLBS, which find disease-linked genes still primarily use data from people of European descent. That huge imbalance, that gap in diversity, it has major consequences. It directly affects how well diagnostic tools work, how effective treatments are, and how accurate risk predictions are for non-European populations all around the world. Basically, it means that the amazing advances in precision medicine risk leaving billions of people behind if we don't actively push to diversify our genetic data sets. It's not just about the science, it's fundamentally about global health equity.
Okay, let's touch on a particularly sensitive topic that often comes up in diverse places, the question of who are the original Indonesians? You hear similar debates elsewhere, this idea of tracing identity through labels like native versus migrant. How does genetics speak to this?
Well, from a purely genetic standpoint, the science is pretty clear and impartial. Geneticists consistently find that all Indonesians today are descendants of multiple ways of migration stretching back tens of thousands of years. Genetically speaking, there's no such thing as a pure native group that existed in isolation. The evidence overwhelmingly points to a rich, blended heritage for everyone. It shows that human populations are always moving, mixing, interacting. So while these identity narratives can be really important socially and culturally, and sometimes stir up sensitive debates about belonging, the genetic data itself tells a story of shared, complex, dynamic ancestry for everybody in the region. It really highlights that human history is one of constant movement and connection.
Wow, what an incredible journey we've taken today, diving into the Indonesian genome. From uncovering this previously hidden treasure trove that's making us rethink early human history, to the amazing discovery of Wallacea, her unique ancestry, that Denisovan link, and even getting these glimpses into ancient social structures, ancient gender roles, all from DNA. It's mind-blowing.
It really is. And this deep dive, I think, shows the immense power of this kind of genetic research. It's not just about piecing together our distant past, which is fascinating in itself. It's also fundamentally about tackling critical challenges we face today in modern medicine and working towards making healthcare fairer for everyone. This knowledge is most powerful when we understand it and actually apply it to benefit people's lives.
Couldn't agree more. So as you go about your day, maybe just think about this, how the incredible genetic diversity of just one region like Indonesia can literally rewrite global human history, challenge our assumptions, and hold keys to better health for millions. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other hidden treasure troves of human diversity are still out there, waiting for us to uncover their secrets, and how might they continue to reshape our understanding of who we are and where we all came from? It definitely invites us all to stay curious, keep exploring. The human story is definitely not finished being written.